Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our second 7th through 12th grade parent question and answer session for the Horsehead Central School District reopening plan for 2020-2021. Tonight, we are going to go over a lot of the questions that have been submitted, and we want to thank the community for doing so. At first, just because we have already recorded our earlier session, which we go over each of the questions from both the morning and the afternoon question list, it will take about an hour to an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes or so. Because we've gone through it once, we will try to go through it a little quicker, but you can also view this morning's recording, which will cover the same exact topics, albeit except for maybe an additional question here or there. So to start off, just to go over some technology housekeeping, I'm going to turn it over real quick to the Director of Technology, Mr. William Giancoli, to talk about buffering, problems, and things that may go on that are not at the district but at home. Mr. Giancoli?
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Yes, so we are broadcasting this live through GST BOCES servers. They actually set up nicely servers so we can have a lot of people view this at home. If you are viewing it at home and you are experiencing some buffering issues, if you look at the window, down at the bottom of the window, you can choose 3 different servers that you are actually streaming it from. This may help with some of the buffering. I would suggest if you're at home and you have some streaming devices going, like you're watching Netflix on other things and you're experiencing some buffering issues, that you may want to turn off those other streaming devices to allow this stream to just play. But otherwise, you should not have a problem. We were able to really work with GST, and they've done a good job at opening up the server so that we can have enough bandwidth to move through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giancoli. Mr. Giancoli is the Director of our Technology Department that will be assisting with home technology as well as on school technology. As we would like to do a couple introductions, we also have our Director of Facilities, Mr. Michael Coughlin, with us this evening, our Director of Transportation, Mr. Pete Wilcox, and our Food Service Director, Ms. Jessica Preston, who will take care of food service in multiple platforms this year, both in school as well as at home, which will be no easy task to say the least. We are also joined by our high school principal, Ms. Chris Earle, and our middle school principal, Mr. Ron Holloway, as well as throughout the district, we have our assistant superintendent, Mr. Tony Gill, with us, our Director of Curriculum and Professional Learning, Ms. Tiffany Owens, our Director of Student Services, Ms. Kelly Squires, our Director of Human Resources, Ms. Caitlin DeFilippo, and joining us in a little bit will be our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Ms. Katie Bizzetti. To start the evening off, we'd like to bring your attention to a PowerPoint that we have that, although you won't be necessarily always seeing our faces, what will happen is we will be talking through the PowerPoint to answer over 100 and 120 questions throughout. So there will be some interruptions to make sure we cover certain things and items from earlier today as we go through the question blank that's on the side. If you see me happening to work on the side, it's because I'm trying to moderate. So as we get started today, we wanted to let individuals know that Mr. Giancoli will share his screen and put up the presentation. But this is about vision and priorities for the Horsehead Central School District. And as we go through our first slide, we wanted to make sure that you see the vision of the district, and most importantly, our plan development priorities, if you can switch the slide, is that we wanted to try to ensure a safe physical environment for students and staff, address social and emotional well-being of our students and staff, and developmentally appropriate and differentiated instructional approaches in a new learning and educational format, such as our hybrid and our remote. One of the things that, if we go to the next slide, that is one of the discussions is how did we arrive at this plan? Well, basically, the district involved over 80 stakeholders and even more when you consider the administration, the Board of Education, and a lot of our collective bargaining unit leaderships in discussing this plan once it was released on what the guidelines were from our governor around July 13th and 15th. and we must accommodate a plan by July 31st. So we were really only given 2 weeks when we were actually promised from June 1st to start this process. And right now, we really wished we would have had been able to start that early, because there's a lot of work to do in just a short time. So we use these survey results. We analyze the health and also the education department's rules. The Department of Health and Department of Education guide our work as we try to address and meet state requirements. We really focused on 5 key areas of health and safety: transportation, nutrition, social emotional well-being, and of course, one of the most important is instruction. We tried to make sure that we looked at the educational formats from a studied approach, a research approach, and we also discussed both of these educationally and operationally as their feasibility. So as we go to the next slide, what happens is we conducted an initial survey, and what people needed to understand is the governor gave us a range or a continual learning of entirely 100% in person, entirely 100% remote, and somewhere in the middle of a hybrid of remote and online learning and in-person learning together. Ultimately, the committee ended up working and really coalescing around the hybrid and the remote, because the 100% in person, trying to meet the Department of Health factors as well as the state education factors, really had difficulty being able to meet the requirements for social distancing. Just the overall size of our facilities poses its own problems, our transportation limitations, as well as our staffing and the cost to even trying to cut everything in half. We had just run out of space. So officially, our ability to feed in all of these operational capacity issues really left us no choice that we could not meet the Department of Health standards or the state education standards and the governor's requirement for a safe reopening of school. Ultimately, it's always in the governor's hands, although he's been saying it is in the parents' hands and the teachers' hands. He has opened schools, and we must work within the continuum of that learning. For Horseheads, that continuum will be starting off in the hybrid and the 100% remote combination. So that's how we've gotten to this point. As we go to the next slide, that will hopefully help other people understand. We're starting to move now from the planning phase to the implementation phase, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Tony Gill at this point, as he will walk through some of that, and I start to check off some of the questions that we start to answer. So thank you for joining us, and as we move through this, you will hear a lot about health and safety. You'll hear a lot about instructional and instructional approaches, technology, as well as one of the key pieces, the financing of this at the end, because ultimately we are still limited in what we can do, and we still face a potential 20% cut from our governor. So thank you, and Tony, it's this time yours to take away.
Sure, thank you, Tom. So as Tom mentioned, we went through those initial phases of creation of a plan with those stakeholder groups, and we're now into this implementation phase. You can see that time frame of August 1st to September 8th. We are still trying to address different issues, move forward on, as you'll hear from us as we present tonight, and working out the logistics of implementing what we need to do according to New York State. So I just want everybody to keep in mind that we have this time frame to make this movement and to put things into action. Key part of that was this getting the feedback from parents and having them select the particular mode that they were going to choose, whether it be the hybrid or 100% in person. Online, 100% online. And with that information, following up with parents, making sure all parents were reached out to, and then the task of dividing our capacity of our classrooms into 2 cohorts, and to make sure that we have the right amount of students at any given day, and that work was done by our principals and our counselors over the last week. Finishing up today, parents should have been notified or will be being notified of that, the placement of the hybrid day tonight. Those messages are going out and emails going out. And then more information to follow up from the individual buildings, as well as from district office on the variety of things we need to keep the community informed of as we move through this implementation phase. A question that was asked was about that movement of a child that might have been selected into a hybrid and would now like to go to 100% remote. Let's start with that scenario first. Yes, of course, there might be instances to which a child, or for that matter, the whole building, as we'll talk about momentarily, or a whole district, goes into a 100% remote um, mode or mode of instruction. We are set up, of course, to do that and to move to that. The more difficult one is to go from the 100% remote into a hybrid model and to choose to come back on select days. This is because, as I just mentioned, we've selected these cohorts to which students are placed because of the capacity of the classroom to ensure we have no more than 10 to 12, depending upon the size of the class, in that room. So when we and this allows, and we'll talk about PPE and masks momentarily, but to have appropriate social distancing so students can have the opportunity to take off their masks during instruction. And again, we'll talk about that more in a moment. If we enter more people into that equation, we run into what Tom was talking about as far as social distancing and the number of students in capacity inside a classroom at any given moment. And we set up the system to handle capacity of the classrooms in the hybrid first. So to come off a remote instruction into that would be difficult. As we go through the school year and we see things how progress, of course, we can adjust and alter. And that's, of course, our next phase as we implement this plan, and then we make alterations as required by Department of Health and New York State guidance. So notification of those assigned models going out to parents. Next, the very difficult task going to Pete Wilcox and his crew on the routing and trying to figure out the bus stops and where we're picking up kids and what kids we're picking up based on that information. So he'll speak with that a little later on, and as well Mike and Caitlin about preparing our facilities and what that looks like. So much of that work now in process, now that we have some of those official numbers of what kids will be in our buildings. Principals finishing up their master schedules, and then obviously Jessica and Joe Kilmer working on the cafeteria and the queuing and how many students will be in our buildings at any given time and how many of them are eating and purchasing lunches. And if not, what does it look like to go through that process? Again, Jessica will be talking about that a little bit later. So a lot of the conversation today is about the implementation of what we're doing. And I don't want to, I did miss that second to last one, that instructional expectations and having those conversations currently, and we'll speak more about that. So that's kind of the phase we're in right now, is putting to the operational and educational plan into motion and putting the pieces in place, and that's what you'll hear from the directors tonight. There is a part about the preparedness to go to 100%, if so ordered, by executive order, and I'm going to ask Caitlin or Tom to pick that up to give that detail.
Sure, Tony, I'd be happy to help. Yes, so we do have a plan in place. As you mentioned, we have a plan that we are able to meet all of the Department of Health elements that are required for reopening school. We know we can reopen school because Governor Cuomo has set a regional rate. He looks at, we are able to reopen if the infection rate is less than 5% over a 14-day rolling average. We're fortunate here in the southern tier to be under 1% right now. If the infection rate does rise, our regional infection rate rise above 9%, we know that we will be automatically closed. The governor has indicated today that in addition to the automatic 9% closure rule, that he will be taking a close look at individual districts. If there is an outbreak in any individual district, we may be closed before the entire region reaches 9%. So it's something we will obviously watch and monitor together with the help of Chemung County Health Department. Mr. Coughlin and I, we can walk you through some of the health and safety parts of our plans. It really starts with a partnership. This is a partnership between teachers and staff members and administrators and also parents. We do need parents to be on board because their participation will make sure that everyone in Horseheads is able to be as safe as we possibly can. There will be, starting right out with how your students enter school, there will be health screenings when kids come into school each day. We will be monitoring their temperatures. We will be taking temperatures of all students, and the guidelines tell us that any student who has a temperature greater than 100 will not be permitted to enter school. They will be asked, they will be put aside to the nurse's office, and parents will be contacted immediately to make sure that they're able to come and get students. It's probably a good idea to get in the habit of checking your students' temperatures before they do come to school in the morning. So then you know you're not going to have any surprises once kids do get to school and get screened at school. In addition to the temperature screening, there will be a periodic questionnaire sent home to families. We expect to send this questionnaire home on a weekly basis for hybrid students. That might look like on the first day your student comes in for either their A or their B day, they would be asked to complete the questionnaire, and parents would have to indicate whether the student has been in close proximate contact with anyone who's tested positive for COVID-19, or if they have traveled to a state with high community spread. We received a lot of questions from parents about the mask use policy. This is now on our website, as well as a lot of other additional information, the plan in full, together with some frequently asked questions. So I'd refer you to our website for more detailed information. One of the important things on there is the mask procedure. So masks are recommended at all times, and they're required anytime individuals can't be socially distanced in the school setting. So masks will absolutely be required on school transportation, anytime students or staff are moving about the hallways, during any transitions from maybe their classroom or to the lunchroom, or to go to visit an office, or if they have to go use the bathroom. And also during class time, if students and the teacher are able to be socially distanced, and Mr. Coggan will talk a little bit about what the classroom setups look like. They're going to be different than the traditional setting. They are socially distant classrooms, but anytime students are in their seats and everyone's stationary and socially distant, that's when mask breaks come into play. Students are free to take off their masks and have a mask break at that time. If then the instruction changes, so perhaps the teacher has to come around and take a look at student work, or maybe students might be gathering together to work on something in a group setting, masks will have to come on. So teachers will probably be getting used to giving cues to students to say, okay guys, time for masks, put your masks on, and students will be asked to comply with all reasonable directions of the teachers. It's crucial that we do get cooperation from students and also staff members on mask wearing and the other parts of our plan in order to keep everyone safe. On the mask use policy, you'll notice there's a superintendent's written directive. Dr. Douglas has issued a directive that makes clear that failure to abide by any parts of our health and safety protocols will be considered a violation of the code of conduct, and it will put a student at jeopardy for a disciplinary referral. We got some questions about what constitutes a mask. So a mask is a facial covering that covers both the nose and the mouth. It can be cloth, it can be disposable. We know that a lot of parents intend to send their children with their own mask from home, and that's fine, that's great. But if a student happens to forget their mask, or maybe the mask strap breaks during school, or they hop on the bus and they don't have a mask with them, we will have ample supply to give a mask to anyone that loses theirs, or if it gets lost or damaged throughout the day. We did get some questions also about face shields. So while face shields don't qualify as a facial covering, students are welcome to wear them in addition to their regular face masks. And they can also wear the face shields anytime while they're socially distant. If you want to wear a face shield instead of a mask, that's fine. Lunchtime, obviously, similar to if anyone's been out to a restaurant or seen the restaurant protocols in New York State, if you are seated and socially distant while you're eating your lunch, obviously you're welcome to take your mask off, as would be necessary to eat. Let's see, if a student cannot wear a mask for health or health reasons, we did get this question, we do need written verification from the medical provider of the student, so we can make sure we're taking a look at that and that it is a legitimate reason for not having medical reason for not having to wear a mask. We also received many questions about testing for COVID and how the district is going to act if we do have a positive case of COVID within our schools. So we have been working closely with the Chemung County Department of Health. We've been working with 12-month employees in the school buildings since probably around June. So we have developed a relationship and an open lines of communication. We know that as far as contract tracing, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We do rely on the advice and support of the Chemung County Department of Health, which is led by the New York State Contact Tracing Program. We know that contract tracing closure could range anything from specific students or staff or groups to individuals, maybe an entire building, maybe a classroom, maybe an entire school district might shift to remote learning. But it all very much depends on the advice that we're getting from the public health experts about how we should approach that. There is no mandatory testing for COVID-19 before your students re-enter school. I know a lot of colleges and institutions of higher learning do have that. We do not have testing facilities here at the Horsehead Central School District to be able to accommodate that. So that is why it's crucial that we do enforce all of the health and safety requirements that we do have and that we can control.
Mr. Filippo, if I can just break in just on the testing, the code of conduct and the mask, just to remind parents that everything here is about safety and security of not only the students, but our staff here and the community in general. Please understand that these violations of the code of conduct or the mask or the safety protocols, say for instance at the secondary level of a student bringing cigarettes or smoking materials or really important vaping materials, they will not be tolerated on school property, and that will have some of the most severe reactions because they definitely jeopardize individual health. So please have a conversation with your children if that is an issue in your family, because if they're even in possession, we will remove the safety hazard from the school, and we don't want to be putting everybody in undue hardship. So please have that conversation beforehand, as well as reasonable requests will not be, how would you say, ignored by students. Masks and social distancing are must. We will not be a school like other schools where large gatherings have taken place because we will be socially distant and have a much smaller student population. So we expect everybody to be flexible but understanding and be compliant with our needs for safety and security. So thank you.
We do also have protocols in place for how students and staff members return to school after an illness. So we know there will be people who throughout the course of the year become ill either for COVID-19 or for another illness. There is the protocol will involve at a minimum documentation from a healthcare provider clearing the person to return to school, a negative COVID-19 test result, and symptom resolution, or if there is a COVID-19 positive case, the student or staff member would need to be released from isolation as required by the Department of Health. So again, we're fortunate to have the Chemung County Department of Health to work with here, and we will be following their lead to make sure that the person is clear to return to school before bringing that person back into the buildings. I do think it's probably a good opportunity now to remind everybody that there is a travel advisory that's in place in New York State. I know it's hard to miss if you watch the news much at all because the list gets updated every Tuesday. As we're getting towards the end of the summer year now and people are looking to schedule travel plans, please keep in mind that we will be enforcing the New York State Travel Advisory if your student comes to school and has not been, has been to a state that is one of the high spread states as outlined by New York State, they will not be permitted to attend school until they, and unless they have filled the 14-day mandatory isolation quarantine.
We also need to remind the public that we are mandated reporters to both the Department of Health and the state in regards to this. So please be careful and understand that Facebook posts, comments, we've had families in the area that have been notifying other people via these messages that we will turn over any knowledge that we have to the Department of Health. And we're trying to avoid that by giving the warnings, because some of these notifications may turn into fines for individual families. And unfortunately, we have to maintain the health and safety of our institution. So please try to be mindful so it never puts any of us in those situations who have to refer to the Department of Health.
Mr. Cogden, do you want to talk a little bit about the health and safety cleaning and protocols that we've got in the district?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the cleaning, the health and safety of within the buildings, outside the buildings, transportation. Once again, we'll be following the guidelines from the CDC, New York State Education Department, and the New York State Health Department for protocol and procedures of the cleaning. Disinfecting, sanitizing will go on daily, nightly, as well as continue throughout the day in areas that we feel warranted to follow the protocol. I'd like to assure everyone that's listening, from the beginning of the COVID-19, we've been right involved with it. There's a lot of new technology, a lot of new cleaning. We learn every day something new. This isn't something we've been through before, but we do feel we are ready to open the rooms up in a very safe manner. As far as the cleaning procedures, each room, and when I say a room, it could be a classroom, could be office space, it'll be common areas, cafeterias, gyms. They will be thoroughly cleaned daily and disinfected following the guidelines. We will take special areas that we're going to be using, cafeterias and stuff, and rooms will be changing. That'll be getting a little extra in between changings of classrooms, or we're changing in between lunch periods. Libraries, all hard surfaces throughout the district, as we've looked at different type of chemicals, and we will be doing some misting. We'll be doing some fogging. It's come a long ways. I don't think you'll envision what you've seen early on when you've seen people walking on with hazmat suits and fogging. That's not the type of chemicals we'll be using, and that will not be the means and ways we'll be applying them. One area that we've looked at is a ceramic coating. All of our hard surfaces, this will include bus seats, the desk, teacher's desk, bathrooms, cafeteria tables, all the high touch areas that have been recommended to be disinfected daily. We were applying a ceramic coating where we are. This was not mandated. We feel this is an insurance. We feel that this insurance will add to a step above what we're required to do. The ceramic coating will keep the pH level high on all these surfaces to a level that we've seen scientific information now back that COVID cannot grow on this. This goes the same for many of the viruses and germs that are out there. So this is being applied district-wide. You'll see this being applied to the playgrounds. Playgrounds will be another area. They'll be disinfected every morning. The ceramic coating will be on there, and we'll follow guidelines as well as use what's required. We've learned a lot since we've started on the difference between the virus on hard surfaces and then when it's airborne. So those will be hand washing stations are being looked at now to be added. As far as all the hand washing stations throughout the building will be properly fitted for sanitation and for needs of the students. Pretty much the protocol on all cleaning areas. We've hired a third-party consultant Okay, this new technology coming in, and we'll be training our staff. It would be from the transportation department all the way down to our maintenance department and cleaning department as we use these new technologies, new tools, that we're properly trained and we're assured that we're leaving the area in a very safe setting for our students and for our staff. So a little bit talking about the fogging that you've been seeing, and the misting machines. The district has purchased several different pieces of equipment that will be used for, again, from the buses to the playgrounds, to the athletic areas that we will be at least using. Might not, we'll talk a little later on in sports and stuff, but we will using spaces. The most part, these will be applied in the evening and following the manufacturer's recommendation for curing time and being applied properly before the students and the staff are back in the building.
Mr. Coughlin, just so that I'm clear, I've got a couple new questions that came in from earlier, but all the cleaning processes and the cleaning agents are under the direction of the Office of Facility Services under the State Education Department. So you can't be using cleaners that are not approved by them as well as the Department of Health, correct?
That's correct. And we'll talk a little later when we're getting on with, as things are brought in, that we want to be very cautious. What we're using does not get cross-contaminated with someone using something different. So we've gone through the whole district, Dr. Douglas, looking at the cleaning supplies we've had, and we've identified which ones should be used, for what purpose they should be used. But everything we are using, SCD and the CDC, Center for Disease and Control, we're working off their recommendations.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked this is we have a question from a concerned parent who must be talking to somebody that they know on the cleaning staff, because they said that there's some type of interpretation that it's being communicated to them that they're highly concerned about the products being used, and that they weren't made for the surfaces, and that the surfaces are having problems handling the chemicals, and that if it's doing that, will it affect our children and their bodies and so forth. That is pretty much regulated, and I don't have anyone more confident than you that will certainly make sure you adhere by the Department of Health and Department of State Education Department with those manners. So I imagine somebody's speaking off topic at this point.
Yeah, and we've learned that some of these things we are using can't be on every surface, and we've learned that. All right, we're going to talk, when we talk about some of these sneeze guards, we found on the sneeze guards some of the disinfectant, it hazed them. As we've moved forward and secured these, I'm very confident the products we're using will be safe for our students and our staff. I'd like to talk a little bit about the air filtration throughout the district. This was a big concern. This was one of the mandates in order to open, that we had to make adjustments. The district is ordered. We're waiting for them to be delivered. They will be in place before we open up. MERV 13 filters throughout the district for any mechanical device and the HVAC systems that requires a filter. The MERV 13, as well as we've just recently has ordered some HEPA filter or HEPA fabric as well, for those areas we may struggle with airflow. Along with the air filtration, we've been dealing with our engineers that have retained for the district, as well as a third party we recently have reached out to increase airflow in the rooms. We've been extremely regulated all along the amount of fresh air we must bring into a classroom. And with the new filters and the regs out there, will far exceed that. We're hoping till at least cooling season, getting up to the spaces we can, 100% outside air. And traditionally, depending on the space in a room, every 30, 40 minutes and occupied, a room is made up of fresh air in a classroom. We're hoping to get this down to just minutes. We will be starting the ventilation system much earlier each day. We're hoping to have 2 to 3 fresh air makeups in each space before even staff and students are in. as well as we'll be running them longer into the night for the cleaning staff and other members out there to make sure we assure them and we give them that same quality of air. We've gone through and looking at windows and screens, and recently, I know that was brought up a little bit today, till the colder months come, we will be looking to leave them a little open a little longer at night. We're looking to increase our staff to help with this increased cleaning. We're currently looking, the district's been very supportive in asking what our needs are, and one need was we needed people. And part of their protocols will be getting the schools opened up in the morning, if it be regular classrooms, turning on fans and the ventilation system. It's not so much as the COVID's out there. We come back to a very, our climate has changed so much over the recent years. It seems the beginning of the school in the springtime. So we're hoping to adjust and put them in a comfortable environment while they're here for their educational needs. As we work through those, we will be evaluating that with our third party and our engineers to make adjustments on this mechanical. Has been brought to our attention, we are looking at a couple different spaces out there that people had concerns, and they brought to our attention, and just today we started evaluating one that was just brought today, and all accommodations we will continue to make it in these next couple weeks before we open up. We talked a little bit about classroom setup. You know, one big thing we've been working on in our staff the last 2 full weeks since the directives come out that we'll be opening. We started working through it. We knew we needed to get the rooms for social distancing 6 feet apart when they're in the rooms, so they have that opportunity when they're in there learning to have the mask off. We removed a lot of furniture out of the room. We removed the extra desk because we know now we'll have 50% roughly of our students. Sometimes it might be a little more, but we must maintain the 6 foot. And we've taken things out of the room that were not necessary as much for curriculum at this time, knowing they will be coming back. It could be some flexible seating and some other things that we warranted to take out of the room. So all classrooms, we're continuing to do this right now. We have people working this evening, removing all unnecessary things so we can get the room set up. We will be going back in the rooms that what's left, we'll be applying that ceramic and getting them ready and marking the room so we can keep them at that distance. We've done the same meeting with all administrators when we're going to come to lunch, which I know someone will talk on curriculum, that'll move around. We are looking at spaces to give a break there, looking at the square footage in the cafeterias, and then taking extra space if we needed to accommodate the number of kids. But during the lunch periods, again, all these cafeteria tables will have the ceramic coating applied to them. We will be disinfecting and fogging them every night. Deep cleaning was a word that's been coming up at times, but it'll be regular when I call that. That'll be a normal cleaning in the evening, prepared for the students to come in between lunch periods as they're coming in. They'll be disinfected and wiped down before the next students come into this space. We met with the food services, will talk, we'll be put protocol in place as they're coming through the lines and signage up to keep the 6 foot distancing as they're moving to their spot to have their lunch. Travel through the hallways. We've looked at that. We've taken each building. How can we keep a flow that keeps them? You'll see a little more, you know, you'll pretty much always be on the right side walking down a hall. I know in the past they would tend to, in between periods, it was very chaotic at times. We will be working, educating the students. It was kind of very refreshing when we were sitting in some of our group meetings to hear a staff member, that'll be my job. The member was a phys ed teacher. We'll train the kids. They'll get there. And it was very refreshing to know this will be a team effort. No one person, no one group. It's going to take all of us together to get through this. So the signage will be up, and you'll see that if you come to visit our school. It'll start similar to what you're seeing in restaurants, from a mask being required to enter the building, to signage up to distance them from our staff when they first come in to greet. as well as, like I said, going down the hallways and other areas that we need to maintain distance in a safe, effective way to travel throughout the buildings. We did talk a little bit on my list, a little bit about recesses and stuff when they get break. We're continuing to work on that, looking at phasing, what we can do outside to mark down some social distancing. We did make some templates up for when kids are out in small groups. We talked a little bit about the playgrounds will be disinfected daily, as well as ceramic coating will be applied to all of the playgrounds throughout the district. And any of the other areas we felt that this would add a value to our safety. I know a little bit on that. We'll talk a little bit more that was on my list. We didn't get much into it. All fire drills will still be going on. We are currently working with the administration as we see the schedule and the students coming up. These are still required. Safety drills as well. We will be following the regulations that we are required to do with social distancing, and I'm confident we can get through these drills and these numbers under the recommended times in a very safe fashion. That's kind of what I got so far on what we're working on. I don't know if you have any other questions.
I think now we move on to transportation at this point. So.
Thank you.
All right, transportation it is. Welcome, everybody. I like to say that too, because I know that every year we're going to get a bunch of new parents. So right now we appreciate all the students that we are going to be able to transport, all the support that we're getting from parents, especially the patience that we have from parents. If you're brand new, one of the first things you want to know is, when is my child going to get their busing information? I would love to be able to give that to you right now, but that kind of leads into something that I'm very proud of. And the team that we've got working together here that I've been working with, this administration, has put a lot of work. And you're just getting a taste of what they've been doing for the last couple of weeks and months to be able to prepare for school. So just today is transportation getting the information for the different cohorts, the different groups, the A and the B. And of course, that's just a small part of the whole district's needs, including special needs, outside schools, all the programs that we go to. And the committees that we had set up really did a lot for every one of our departments. They really were amazing. For instance, we had the ability to sit down with parents and community members and talk about different things that gave us a perspective that we may not have been thinking of. And I know transportation, my department, really appreciates the hard work that's gone into that. So I really just want to start with that. I do also want to share the 2 points from the SED guidelines that really helped to guide us. This was a lot of pages. Transportation, though, started out with 2 points that first I want to read to you. By the way, they're all reopening mandatory requirements. And then the second part of it would be items for consideration. And that's how the format that they had here. So we had to answer every one of these items that came up. But here's how they started the transportation section. It says that the school bus is an extension of the classroom. Therefore, many of the recommendations that apply to school buildings, like social distancing and frequent cleaning, should be applied to the school bus as well. So every department, including, and it's probably especially including, Mike Coughlin's department with facilities and cleaning and all the work that we've done together and direction that we got from him, has helped us to make the school bus an extension so that we can do everything that we do on the school the same, or I should say on the bus, the same that is done at the school. So it makes us feel safer, makes us feel more comfortable, knowing that all of those things have been researched and that we're following proper protocols. But we keep saying in our committee over and over that Horseheads has never just done what we needed to do. We've always gone above and beyond. And you will see that we definitely have done this. So here's the second thing they say. Let me read the 2 sentences here. School districts and other applicable schools are expected to fulfill existing mandates regarding the safe and effective transportation of students who are homeless, in foster care, have disabilities, and attend non-public schools and charter schools. Although meeting these obligations will certainly pose challenges, these expectations continue to be in place. And so it tells us then we need to plan accordingly. Well, our response to that was pretty simple. We will continue to utilize our established procedures. Basically, Horseheads isn't going to stop doing the things that we already know that we have to do, and we're happy to do it. We always go a little above and beyond. But also that helps us to appreciate where we stand, though, as far as following the guidelines. If you put those two things together, there's certain things that we absolutely can't stop doing, but then there's other items that we have to be careful to change. And of course, the cohorts are one of them. An example of who's affected by that, lots, obviously the kids, in the way that they're divided up, and they're getting their education in different ways this time around. But the transportation can't be any different. And so that's the case. CTE is a good example, BOCES. We would love to be able to send them all 5 days. We just can't do that because we have to be able to keep a separation of these large groups of kids so that everything that we do is consistent throughout the whole school. So we're going to watch as the school buses continue to do that with having much less kids on the bus. For instance, we have mandatory requirements that we can only have so many kids on a bus. We know that there's usually, they say, 3 high schoolers. Have you ever seen a school bus with 3 high schoolers per seat? That's almost impossible. And it's very rare that Horseheads ever does that. Now we have a big change. And so we're having the percentage of ridership now is probably going to be somewhere in the 25%. So one child, maybe 30%. One child per seat is about what we're looking at, with some small adjustments based on if there are, and we've tried to do this, and the principals have been awesome, I have to say, with dividing up these cohorts so that your family members can be together as well. And if your family members can do that, then we'll make small adjustments if they're sitting in the same seat so that we can still have the proper social distancing. So we have a lot of work for routing at this point. I would say it's absolutely daunting what we have to do to get started because a lot of it has to be done by hand. But we're very confident that we can do it. And we're taking precautions to make sure that we're going to have everything right so that we can contact you and let you know what is going to happen. Yes, it's going to take us a little time to get to you with the information, but we really don't want you to fear. Everybody's in the same boat at this time, and it's in our best interest to communicate with you what's going on. It's in our best interest that you know what school bus and approximately what time. The approximate time I have to speak to too, because every year we'll always say it's a computer generated time, give or take. And then you'll know in the first week or so as it starts to work itself out. Well, I think we'll all agree these are not normal circumstances by a long shot. And so we're going to have to just kind of play it by ear a little bit, and we'll give you the closest that we can. And as the first week of transportation goes by, obviously we'll get real close so that you can know exactly when your child is going to be picked up. But I also want to mention with these guidelines that we got, the state aid guidelines, that we have to follow everything that guidelines, and we have, and of course above and beyond as well. But this is not the only place where transportation, other areas of the school too, but where transportation has to go to. We have other agencies that govern us. You know, we have DOT, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, we have DMV, and DOT is state and federal. So what we have to do is look at what kind of recommendations there are and can we even do it? And here's an example. In the SED guidelines, they talk about sneeze guards on the school bus. Well, we did a little research on that and then found out that DOT no way recommends that there are any sneeze guards on school buses. Well, that's always fun when we find one that's saying, yes, you can do it, and the other says, absolutely not, we don't allow it. So there's been a lot of research that's been into all the things that we can and cannot do so that our kids can be as safe as they possibly can. And our drivers are being trained, and they will continue to be trained until school starts. Our staff is being trained about all of the different things that we can and we can't do. We're finding that this is definitely a big project, but we really, as was brought out earlier, we really need your help, your cooperation in working on this. It's important that we're consistent so that our routing can stay the way it is, but we also need your communication. So please call us if there's any questions, and this department will work it out one way or another and we'll make sure that your children are transported in the safest way possible.
So thank you. Just to be clear, with BOCES, we will transport and students follow their cohort schedule. When they are in, we will transport them to BOCES. When they are scheduled to be remote, they go to BOCES remotely. They are not allowed to drive to BOCES. They must follow our schedule, as that helps BOCES to social distance. There's also a question, well, can I drive them to BOCES and just drop them off? No, BOCES is under the instruction and guidance that the students must follow ours. So on the days that we tell them that they're remote, they are expected to be remote. So please be aware of that. In regards to transportation, there was just two other questions. Drop off and pick up of students at the high school. Chris, if you can weigh in on that, as well as I'm sure the middle school, and I need these to be short and succinct because I know you'll be sending out information as soon as possible. And the fact that we deliver students to private schools, they are not allowed in the building because they are not students of the building. So if we are transporting them, they are going to have to be able to wait outside in the weather for bus transfers and so forth. And we will be reviewing whether or not those transfers and even that transportation is only on 2 days a week or 5 days a week. We will have to look at that because we transport the same way we transport our students even to private schools. And seeing how we are transporting only 2 days a week, it would seem to lead us in that course, but we are trying to seek legal advice. So in regards to drop-off pickups, Ron and Chris, and student parking.
So at the high school, we're working due to the construction about where drop-off and pickup will exactly be. Probably back like it was last year. And to student parking, all of the seniors have been notified if they received a parking pass, and they will still park in what used to be the old junior lot, which is now currently the senior lot between Center and Grand Central. And they will all come into one door where they'll have their temperature checks and go through the process there.
And Chris, because the new parking lot is being built right now and they're starting to do pavement, it's important for parents to understand that there will be no waiting in the one-way section to pick up a student after. Parents will need to pull into the parking lot and the student will need to come out to their car, as that is now a fire lane and it will be subject to ticketing. Ron,
yeah, so as far as the middle school, obviously we won't have any student parking as most middle school students don't drive, so that's not an issue for us. As far as parent drop off in the morning, that'll look almost identical to what it did last year. If we have 7th grade parents on the call, then it will look similar to what 6th grade. It's same lot. It's the upper front parking lot. They'll be dropped off in the bus lane as they did last year. We will be utilizing some larger spaces for students to be waiting before going to first period, so that we can maintain that 6 feet of social distancing, as well as have space to conduct the temperature checks, as Chris talked about. As far as the bus drop-off, that'll be identical to last year as well. They will come in the field house entrance. Again, we'll be utilizing larger spaces than we did last year for keeping students until that first period starts, again, with the ability to do those temperature checks and keep that social distancing. The one thing I would note about the front parking lot is, those of you that were in that lot last year, you'll notice a little bit different with the exit. There are now only a left turning lane and a right turning lane out of the parking lot. So that's a nice addition to the safety features of that lot, as those of you that were involved last year know that oftentimes we could have cars turning into each other. So that's been fixed. There is a concrete pillar there in the middle. A little island, so just be cautious of that, with a stop sign at the end of it. So other than that, pretty much the same as last year.
Just one quick thing I forgot as well, that and I think it's important for the folks to know for comfort level, that the cleaning that's done in the schools is done, as Mr. Coughlin brought out, is done on the buses as well. And we are going above and beyond. The different levels where we'll go out and pick up a group of kids, bring them back, and then go out and do a secondary run. This is in the morning. even between those runs, the drivers will be cleaning and disinfecting those buses. So there is no time period where children will be in a seat or an area that hasn't already been cleaned before they got there. I just thought that's important everybody know.
Thank you all. Katie, are you doing food service?
No, I believe Jessica joined us tonight.
Oh, that's right. I know Joe did it earlier. I'm sorry about that, Jessica. We have about 3 to 4 minutes on food service. One of the big things is we are doing double the food service at this point. Good luck, Jessica.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. So yes, I'm here to let everybody know a little bit about what's going on in our food service plan. As it's been shared by others, the cafeteria will also be enacting recommendations by the CDC as well as the Department of Health. Our on-site nutritional services will provide socially distanced dining with a cafeteria pickup of individually portioned food, and that will be done with a collaboration with our building administrators. The sharing of tongs and other touch points such as that will be removed. We will again be partnering with the transportation department for our off-site meals. And on hybrid days with distance learning, we will provide access for all students to breakfast and lunch meals. The breakfast and lunch meals will be available in meal packs for 3 days. The students enrolled for 100% distance learning will have access to a 5-day meal pack with 5 breakfasts and 5 lunch meals. This is very similar to the weekly meal program that we've been enacting through this summer for the emergency meal services that has had Wednesday pickups or home deliveries. We will be following up with instructions for how to sign up for the meals and the hybrid and distance learning program, so stay tuned for that. With that being said, I also want to point out that it's important to note that our free emergency feeding program that ran from March is going to end in August. That means that students will need to complete a free reduced application to have access to free meals. Anyone without an approved application will be enrolled as a full paid student. Currently, the free meal applications are available on the school district's website. And as always, if anybody has issues with those, feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to get one out to you. As far as that, that's all I have.
And it's really important for our community to understand that everything along the free food or reduced food application process is highly confidential. Even when the students come through the line, it's still highly confidential. You wouldn't even know it. So even during this tough time, we would ask everybody that qualifies, please make sure you reach out. There's no harm in that, and we want to try to do best by our students to make sure that students get the food they need and are ready to perform at the highest levels. So please reach out to your building principal if you're worried about that, or to the cafeteria and the food service program. It's a wonderful way that we can help all in our area.
I'll start this one off, Tom, and then hand it over to Cal real quick. As part of the work that we did as committees, we intentionally separated out the social emotional well-being as its own criteria. It's found throughout every section, nearly every section of the New York State Education's guidance for reopening, and keeping it at the forefront of our work. It's an initiative anyways we had working through our 2030 work and the wellness of our students and our staff. So with that, we had several questions relating to orientations and tours and those transition years, freshman first day, the first grade, and going into fifth, and our primary folks, of course, as well. And I know Ron is going to speak briefly to what that looks like when he had his orientations in those 6th coming into 7th grade. And then Kel can finish up with those measures of anxiety and stress and the conversations had there. So Ron, if you want to start that off, and then Chris briefly about some of those orientations or tours conversations.
Sure. Yeah, so typically at this point, all of our 6th grade students, incoming 7th grade students, would have actually had some tours with the guidance counselors during the school year last year. Usually it was, I think, scheduled for the week before we went, or week after we went on dismissal. We would also be right in the middle of our summer orientation programs with our guidance counselors, which obviously we weren't able to do that. We are working on, I actually have a meeting with our teachers tomorrow to talk about what that first couple of days school looks like for our incoming 7th graders, knowing that the orientations they typically would have had, they just didn't have. So how do we get them comfortable? How do we orient them to the building to make them feel like it's as easy as transition as possible? So that means it'll take place tomorrow. In the meantime, I am working with Mr. Gill and some of the district leadership to talk about how we can do our schedule pickup prior to the beginning of school, possibly in small groups, so that our 7th graders can come pick up their schedule and do a self-guided tour and have access to the administrators and counselors to ask any questions they might have. So that process is in place at this point. One thing that I will mention is that the 2 biggest anxiety producing things in middle school students coming in is, number 1, lockers. So we can set their mind at ease a little bit this year because we're not able to utilize lockers this year. So remembering where the locker is, learning how to open the locker, remembering combinations, things like that, they won't have to do. So they will be carrying bags and things throughout the school day. So that we can relieve that anxiety, hopefully. The other piece is getting lost. So essentially the middle school, those of you that have been here, it's 2 big squares on top of each other, and it's nearly impossible to get lost in our building. So even if they do come in without the so-called orientation, they'll be here with roughly 50% the number of students. So the hallways aren't going to be crowded. There'll be plenty of staff in the hallway to help them find their way. And 99% of our kids within a couple of days know exactly where they're going without even using their schedules. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they're comfortable, given some of the safety guidelines that we have to follow. It may not be an in-person orientation like we typically do, but rest assured we will definitely take good care of them. Staff here have been working with middle school kids for a very long time, as have I, and we know what their anxieties are, and hopefully we can have things in place day 1 if we can't get them ahead of time to make them feel at ease.
And at the high school, we're doing a lot of the same similar things, knowing that we no longer have the link. So the school setup with our new so-called link is going to be new to not only freshmen, but any sophomore, junior, or senior that were here previously. So with half the amount of staff or students that will be here, we'll spend that first week of school really getting acclimated to the building and getting familiar with each room and where they are at this point.
And I think that's important to point out. Families, you are getting contacted today on which cohort you are in for your students, A or B cohort, or 100% remote. But it's also important that there will be a calendar coming out tomorrow that will tell you all the year's A days and all the year's B days, just so that you know at the beginning of the year, from Labor Day to September 11th will all be conference days. We're revising the calendars, so you'll see that. But we will also be sending out a detail that the second week will only be to address each cohort individually with no remote instruction. And remote instruction really starts that 3rd week with everybody starting to practice. So we will send the calendar out tomorrow along with your day that you are assigned to, and that will help to build some of the social emotional time in as we start the school year.
Okay, so with regards to measures to address any social emotional supports and anxieties that may be occurring, we recognize as a school district that everyone is feeling a bit of stress with regards to coming back to school. You know, there's some excitedness, but also quite a bit of nervousness around how this school year is going to look. And as Tony indicated, we had an entire committee of of staff, community members, parents, taking a look at the guidance that came from the state on how best to reopen while keeping in mind what those stressors and anxiety points could be and how we support, you know, the 3 different areas of people that we're coming in contact with, which would be our students, our staff, and our families. So we are looking at ways for staff first to re-enter the building, get comfortable with the building again. Although some of us as staff have been back in the buildings working since mid-June, many of our staff have not been in for lengthy periods of time since mid-March. So, you know, just as when we entered the buildings in June, we took a little bit of time to reorient ourselves to our work environment and to being in a work environment with other people. and how to navigate all of those new social graces that are in our norms. Staff really need to take some time to get comfortable in the learning environment and what that will look like for them, so that they can then support students and families in the best way we can when they enter the building, so that we can begin learning in the best way possible. So we're looking at providing supports and training for our staff, as well as for our students and our families, to give support in these areas, to do, intermittent and frequent check-ins, just to make sure our families and students and staff are feeling comfortable. We have a list of resources both for school and in the communities that people can access, and we'll really be keeping this in the forefront of our minds as we enter the school year and throughout the school year.
Thanks, Kelly. And to reiterate, of course, we talked about this with the Transportation Committee because that first point of access, those that are welcoming kids after they get out of their cars, that those first experiences in acclimating staff and students to the new environment they'll be working in and learning in. So the next piece is going to be instruction. I'm going to talk about a couple things, and I'm going to hand it over to Kel and Tiffany and then Kelly to assist in some of this conversation. As been mentioned earlier, when it comes to our programs to which we send students to, typically our BOCES programs, you'll see some listed there. There is a variety of different cohorts or days to which students attend those particular instructional programs. The BOCES CTE, they follow our cohort and hybrid-based system, and each one of those on there follow a different schedule based on the needs of the students in that particular program. So those that if you have students in those programs, conversations are being had with you to explain what those transportation and the logistics of that program's requirements are. In any instance, whether in those programs or with us and those hybrid days and on remote days or 100% remote, there is an attendance component. New York State was very clear on moving forward, and I quoted here in that fourth bullet down, that regular and substantive interaction with an appropriate certified teacher regardless of the delivery method, and that includes this alignment with the content and the state standards, routine scheduled times for students to interact and seek feedback and support from their teachers. So when we look at the schedule, it is developmentally appropriate, synchronous and asynchronous learning. We know that there's differences. I'll be frank, everybody on this call knows what it means to be on a Zoom call for an hour or two or three. Imagine being on for 6 hours in a synchronous environment of learning. There is a lot of fatigue that goes with that. We have to be developmentally appropriate when we think about the learning for our students and at the different levels of what's appropriate. How much exposure and how much synchronous learning does a kindergartner have, and how much as opposed to what a senior in an ACE course might have. So we have to be aware of that connection, but we know it is a requirement. At the 7 through 12 level, schedules have been developed that students will be following, and there's expectation that that be that quote unquote regular interaction. That's where the slated time for that interaction and feedback and support to occur is based on that scheduled piece that Ron and Chris have set up. Likewise, in our pre-K through 6, it's very similar. There are scheduled times to which ENL, ALA, math, or specialist blocks are, to which there's an anticipation of some kind of synchronous and then asynchronous work. Again, synchronous means just, we'll talk about the learning management system in a moment, that you are connecting with your student, the teacher is connecting with your student in the moment through an activity and checking in and providing feedback. And then the student might drop off to do asynchronous, be offline, completing a task, to submit and to get feedback on, or work with other students as the case might be. The key to all this is that in this learning management system is it does have the ability for analytics of attendance. When we looked at the spring and looking into this coming school year, we do have those that do not have access, that have broadband issues or connectivity issues. When taking attendance, it's very clear by what we're required to do as a district to be cognizant and aware of those instances so that we are not, when we're taking attendance, it's not because they had connectivity issue or they're unable to connect because of where they live or the service around them. We have to separate those out in our administrative team and our social emotional support people and our teachers, of course, interacting with students to know those instances But we are required to take that attendance by the New York State regulations upon us. So the learning management system, I want to explain that very briefly. People are familiar with Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams. People are also familiar with maybe Flipgrid, YouTube, Khan Academy, Nearpod, and a whole host of other tools to provide instruction and for students to learn from. A learning management system brings them all together into one spot. We heard loud and clearly from the community that they wanted, and from teachers, a single point access, a simple way to go in and to connect all those things so it's not being, the student isn't going to multiple platforms, multiple areas, multiple tools, but as much can be embedded into a single program that syncs with our student management system, school tool. And so there's a talking between those two systems. So we looked at several different systems, and someone actually mentioned in their questions, whether it been, there's a program called Buzz, Ingenuity. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. It's Learning is one of the ones that's rose to the top in the forefront of our work as we're exploring right now and looking as possible the learning management system that we'll move forward with. So the work that was done in Google Classroom, the work that was done in Microsoft Teams by our staff will be honored, and that can be synced in. And as a parent, you have a single point access as the student, the parent portal, to see the different courses that your students enrolled in, to go to them, to see a much more clearer expectation of timeline, what's due when. So it's, again, one-stop shop for our learning that will be occurring in our buildings that we'll be moving forward with in the next couple weeks as we prepare for the school year.
Tony, then to answer some of the parents' question, the day will look like their actual schedule. Whether they're online, you want to try to be focused for your classes, and then the teachers will direct that offline work. But for the most part, we're following their actual schedule, both at the middle school and the secondary level, and we should prepare to make sure that we're following that, whether we're in remote or hybrid, correct?
Yes. But also to keep in mind, we did have parents that question what happens when I'm an essential worker, I'm working during the day, and my child might not have the access. How can they be synchronous in that moment to attend those classes on that schedule and their instructional periods? Those are the conversations that our teachers and principals will be having, and counselors, to ensure that a student isn't getting jammed up and attendance is being taken appropriately because of the access that they have or the circumstances of the family. Again, the learning management system has an analytics that shows that they are accessing the program, and it might not matter when they are, but that they in fact are doing the work. So that's part of that.
And when is a big thing. It should be on that day sometime.
That's obviously the preferred method. Again, we have circumstantial things that I'm sure we'll work through and working. We also, we talk about technology, and we'll have a slide and briefly talk about that in a moment, but the technology that we have is not like a light switch of flipping on and off. Things go wrong. And as teachers, we all know that in the moment we make adjustments, and in the moment there's going to be tech issues. It's just, we all know that in our work and in our jobs that we have, that sometimes you need tech support to do something. We have to make sure that we're all understanding and are flexible. I think that's something you've mentioned several times, Tom, is that flexibility to move in the moment. We have people taking some great risks and really trying to do what's best for our kids. And we're all going to move forward on this one together, understand that there's going to be some glitches because it is technology and it's not like a light switch. So understanding that and being sympathetic to that and flexible in these movements. There's a piece of it on with students with disabilities. I'm going to hand it over to Kelly to briefly talk about.
Sure. So part of the work when looking at what our student days look like for the planning was specifically geared towards students with disabilities, both with IEPs and 504 plans. So the same type of work is occurring really simultaneously as we're looking at what the full day looks like for our students. We're also looking at a component of the plan that was highlighted in the guidance from New York State about particularly taking care and looking at students that are designated as high needs, which are the students in particular with IEPs or that have special education services. So the plan was released. We then, almost a week later, released both an email and a letter with more detail on what that additional support for the students as designated as high needs would look like. And now we're following up with phone calls from our 3 CSE chairs to the families so that we can make sure that the parents understand what that looks like and that they can play an active role in making sure that they get their questions answered to ensure that they've made an informed choice and they feel that their voice was heard and that their concerns, they have an opportunity to share their concerns with what the support looks like. So we have a tiered level of support, which means the students that have been designated as the highest needs. So for example, that would be the students that are in a classroom that is run by BOCES, whether that be in district or on campus. They will be coming to school 5 days a week. For our in-district run programs, they will also be coming 5 days a week. We heard loud and clear from the families, and that was one of the reasons why the state had designated particular care for students with high needs, is that they were significantly impacted by their ability to access resources depending on how they were presented. Our teachers worked, long and hard to make sure that our students were reached and did the best they could, but it was a difficult situation for students. So you will have received, information on the tiered support. If you have questions on that, I am more than happy to answer them via email or phone call. Please feel free also to call your CSE chairs or the building principals as we're working with them on what the schedules look like and the cohorts look like. 504 accommodation plans will continue as they did prior to releasing of school prior to March. Students that have accommodations, whether it be copy of class notes, extended time on tests, those will all be honored and given to the students to ensure that they have access to their education. Someone had asked earlier in the questions if there were tutoring available. Tutoring is a general education support and not a special education support, and at this time we don't have that level set up. However, again, our teachers are great. If you have or your student has questions on a lesson that they have learned or have questions that they need clarified, please reach out first to your classroom teachers for the area they're having questions with.
Kelly, just a couple, there's a question like our 504 kid is going to school only 2 days instead of 3 or 4 like kids with IEPs. And are tutorings available for 504? Can you just address those so that they understand that that accommodation does not necessarily mean an
Sure, that's what I was just referencing to. So tutoring is just a general education support. We have many students who hire tutors outside of the school day. It's not something that we offer as a special education support. Like I said, certainly they can contact their teacher as their first line of, I have questions, I need something clarified. But tutoring, as I had said previously, is not something we offer through special education. The last piece I just wanted to touch upon quickly is that we're working with our related service providers for the implementation of related services, working across both the hybrid model as well as the remote model. We will be making decisions in conjunction with the parents and the therapist's professional recommendations on what worked best for that student on how they could help access the services. So we will still be continuing with both the teletherapy and in-person therapy.
Thank you, Kelly. One question we got was, I'll take a quick one, was the grading procedures. Grading procedures will be as they standardly are at the beginning of school year. Again, I reference back some of the conversation or comments I made about access and connectivity and flexibility. There will be situations of due dates that, because of circumstances and legit circumstances of connectivity, that there might be grading flexibility or timeline flexibility in grading. But that's part of the professional learning. I know Tiffany and her team will work through and make sure we're all on the same page with the principal support. But it's anticipated that we would follow similar systems to the past. It will just be a different venue. The learning management system, LMS as I'll call it, will have that assessments maybe embedded. Could there be paper items? Yes, of course. And that goes to that bullet there about resources, supply list, education materials, and the distribution of that. So it is anticipated that there's still, not everything will be on a computer-based system, that there, especially the younger levels where you have a manipulative or objects for the phonics and the math curriculum. But even in the older grade levels where we have books that are handed out and used, there are protocols that have to be followed and guidance for the use of shared materials to ensure that they sit for a certain amount of time. And we'll be following those guidelines as the CDC and Health Department of Health tells us to. So there can be sharing of materials. When it comes to the paper packets, yes, and we're asking teachers to think, and we're asking the students in the community, the parents, to think in more of a weekly schedule. So when you have a cohorted Monday, Tuesday, and the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you have this preparedness that you have to make sure that students have what are handed out, anything that they need tangible in person to be able to do work maybe when they're remote on Monday, Tuesday, the following week. So being prepared and making sure the students are prepared. We are looking at opportunities to take especially some of those shared resources and purchase more of them so students could have individual things dedicated to just them, their own set of, again, especially more at the younger grade levels, those manipulatives and those items. When it comes to books, we do have shared books, obviously, in many of our curriculum throughout the 7 through 12. Those would have to just make sure we follow the protocols of sitting for the certain time before they're shared again. And it includes our library system and the work that would be done there. We are looking to increase our usage of our electronic and ebooks. That's something that we've done in the past that we've been investing in, and I would probably continue down that way given the current circumstances of electronic book systems. Distribution, as in the past, we're a little bit changed. We're open. Our buildings are open. Parents will be able to pick up and come get items, laptops, as we'll talk about technology in a moment. But that includes some of this educational material, especially if a student is at 100% remote. If there's circumstances that arises that we can support to make sure that students have what they need, of course, we'll do that. But we are open for business, and there's an opportunity for people to come into our offices and make arrangements to pick up materials for those that are on the 100% remote. When it comes to assessments, I mentioned earlier the more formative and in-house summative assessments, our learning management program, and even some of the other tools I referenced earlier have those embedded in them to use. Still can have your paper and pencil tests. The LMS allows for feedback interactions with the student to let them know what they could do better, and the teacher communication with the work they do there. When it comes to New York State tests, it's unclear. We go forward with the notion that they will be there. The January, the 3 through 8, and then the June regents until otherwise told. And we'll have to adjust to depend upon health department guidelines to be able to administer such tests. So one thing at a time, but that was a question that was asked, and we're just going to monitor that and figure out how that works moving forward. We do have some questions about performance-based academics. Our physical education, music, science labs, and family consumer sciences, home ec, as it's been called in the past, and some of you might refer to it as. Those courses are just a sampling of those 7 through 12 classes being offered that because of Department of Health regulations and requirements of distancing of up to 12 feet for certain activities, we do have to rethink how that looks. I know we'll be talking, Chris, Ron, and members of my team to start reaching out to those departments and conversations with the department chairs of how we formulate those scenarios. We have experts in the classrooms. We have professionals that have been immersed in this. There's some conversations happening throughout the GST BOCES on PE and music and labs, and people are talking and trying to find, discover and create best practices. The New York State regulations do highlight these areas a little bit and kind of give some guidance to districts on what they could do and what it might look like. But really, it's left to the professionals to collaborate with each other and to discover different ways of implementing their curriculum and staying with the New York State standards. So again, modifications have to happen because of the social distance requirements of some of those activities or the in-person nature of some of those activities. But I know our staff will work to make sure that the students are getting the core curriculum and the requirements of the essential learning of those classes. And that leads us, I believe, into the last slide there, which is on technology. Bill, I'm going to ask you in a moment to chime in. I'll hit the connectivity one, and I'll let you speak to the other two. the connectivity has been something we've been working on for quite some time. We actually, working with Pete and the Bus Garage and Jason Johnson, have this, we had a bus that was outfitted to have a access point to deliver safe internet to students. We've since outfitted our buses to have the same access points. We're working with the vendor and GST BOCES to ensure that they work and that they're accessible. I know that the Transportation Department has been reaching out to the local municipalities as well as fire departments to set up these access points throughout the district to allow for a grab and go kind of technology. Our buildings last year were opened up and we have a throw, we can throw our internet quite a bit. I think anywhere between 100 yards to 300 yards, depending upon the building, of safe internet connection. So students can have that aspect as well. It's anticipated that we'll have 10 remote access points to be able to use at the start of the school year, with hopefully 9 more coming online sometime in the early part of the year. So in all, hopefully 19 different access points to provide internet access where there is cell service and connectivity to boost and to send out to households throughout the area. So that is a developing one. I'm proud to say that we've made some huge gains in the last couple of weeks with the diligent work of members of our transportation and tech department. So we'll continue that, and we'll make sure that we communicate those abilities and access points to the public as we move forward with that endeavor. Bill, did you want to speak to the devices and the specs without going into the granular details, maybe of our earlier conversation, but some general understandings?
Yes, thank you, Tony. So for devices, we are trying to gather all the resources that we have here to have devices ready, but at the same time, we're going to need to increase those devices. So it really becomes a supply and demand issue. And when I say supply and demand, I'm not just talking very specific to our district, but we're also talking on a global scale that we're finding that supply and demand everywhere. Vendors are having trouble, even if you're just going to the Best Buy to pick up a laptop. We're finding that it is computers are spare right now. With that being said, we're trying to put things into motion to see what we can do to get devices. In the meantime, we are kind of opening up our network so we can do a BYOD, which stands for Bring Your Own Device. So we are opening it up so that if a student does have a laptop, they can bring it to the school and connect it to our network. What that would allow is that the network does provide filters and securities so that your student can be surfing the net safely and not going where it's not supposed to. Considering we use a lot of cloud-based software, having a laptop or a device that can connect to the internet will allow them to have access, especially if we go to the route of an LMS. So it kind of becomes a general, device can go out and reach the materials that teachers are putting out there. So we will be putting out a spec list, kind of a help to if you're thinking about purchasing your own device. We're putting a specs out there that will work within our network. Real basic standard is 128 hard drive and 8 gigs of RAM. PC is preferred, a Windows-based machine, but Chromebooks, Apple laptops will work on our system as well. So if you have your own device, we do encourage, please bring it in. We did open up BYOD all through the buildings. And as Mr. Gill was pointing out, we also have the Wi-Fi that's in the parking lots and in the buses. They can connect to the BYOD there as well. So there is plenty of connectivity. As far as distribution, we're still working out the details of how that distribution is going to look. In the spring, we were able to hand out somewhere between 800 and 1,000 laptops to families, and then having to do the collection. It is a process to make sure that families know how to log on, especially with the younger kids, and then trying to make that collection and keep track of where our materials are going. So right now there are still some things in the works, and we're hoping to be able to really fit as many needs as we possibly can.
Thanks, Bill. On that last slide, we have just some general inquiries that came in. Tom, did you want to speak to that first one about the extracurriculars and athletics you mentioned previously?
Yeah, I'm going to try to knock off. We've got about another 10 or 12 questions, so I'll try to hit a couple. Ladies and gentlemen, just because of the situation, we're really focusing on the educational program here. Financial situations in New York State are not necessarily easy. We will try to do all that we can, but currently at this time, there are no extracurricular activities, after school activities, or sports. Do we anticipate them? I just do not know. So we really have to focus on the education. So please understand that your local athletic groups and stuff are probably your best way at this point, as we will have to wait and see. And, you know, the hard part is on the bona fide student, those that are 100% remote, we did get guidance that those that are 100% remote, and they probably chose that because they're concerned about COVID, do have the ability to come in for our sports programs. However, I would caution everybody, that's the reason why you chose 100% remote, but that is your choice. But again, I do not know if we will even have extracurriculars in any fashion. The big thing is right now is no extracurricular is approved at this point, except for the yearbooks. In addition, the class advisors at the high school, department and grade level chairs, and the National and Junior Honor Society and the National Honor Society, because they are academic functions. Until future notice, all others are on hold at this point, as the funding for those sources are something that we will have to look at, because we are making additional purchases just to meet the safety and health requirements for this year. Doesn't mean they're going away. It just means we have to be flexible at this year to make sure education happens. In addition, just to hit a quick one, some people are asking about, will there be a code of conduct for those that are on remote? We expect those students that are on remote to be acting as if they're in school on that day if they are online. They dress for school, they appropriately situate themselves so that they are in a studious situation, at a desk, at a table, not in a bed, not lounging on a chair. Everything needs to be as if you were in front of us. That helps the teachers, it helps the other students, and we may need to maintain that sense of decorum. I know one of the things about 2019-2020 yearbooks. The middle school is working on it, but the vendor is slowed at this point. They will get you information as soon as they can. The high school has already distributed those. If you have any questions, please contact the building administration. That will make it relatively easy. At this point, Tony, go ahead and hit a couple others, especially childcare at the secondary level. It's not as needed, but it certainly can support other areas. So, and then I'll come back on and try to wrap up.
Sure. So childcare obviously is the phasing of businesses across the region open. We are not the employer that we're working with the Chemung Child Care Council to figure out the needs of our employees as well as the community to have childcare options in this new remote world that we're moving into. So we are aware of that. We're working, like I said, in the partnership with different agencies to support and figure out how we, because we do not want to be putting our older children and our older students in a position of having to do their own work, and at the same time, of course, having the burden of watching the younger. We know that happens, and it happened in the spring. And as the businesses open up and there's an expectation that we're all back in our offices, speaking for myself and others on this call, we have young children that need a place to go when they're not in the hybrid model. So definitely a passion of many on this call to try to figure out the childcare option and to support the community in finding ways for in places and making sure there's connectivity in those places for children to have a space to continue to be looked after. So that is an ongoing initiative, and like I said, a region-wide initiative we're engaged in. There also was a question about communication. Who do I talk to about X, Y, and Z? We do have a standard practice for communication of who to contact on particular issues. It goes out with our calendar. It's found online. It's part of a policy or a regulation. and it's something that we have a protocol for. Those things still remain. I could tell you in addition to that work, we're looking to provide technology supports as we did in the spring for our students and parents, and to make sure that they can, if they run into glitches or issues that are because of something on our end or some kind of access or the devices that are district devices, to assist so students have the ability to connect and be part and participate in the classroom and the education. So that's a continued conversation that, Tom and Bill and Katie and I are having, and what that looks like moving forward, and what is a help desk for those listening and for students.
Tony, a couple real quick things. There's a question about lunches at the high school, the activity period, and how would that look? I imagine, Miss Earl, you're going to be communicating out, but if you want to just real quick try to address that. And the other thing is about the middle school, because lockers won't be used this year, people will be carrying more stuff. We would obviously ask our teachers to be understanding that we don't need 5 3-inch binders and so forth as we switch to more of a digital platform. But Chris and Ron, 1 minute each.
Yep, so at the high school, we'll still run your schedule as planned. You'll have lunch, and we'll be able to do that in the cafeteria. And then during your activity period, which would be the other 40 minutes after lunch or prior to, you'll have chance to go to a teacher's room for help, a computer labs, the library, or other places around, we're gonna designate around the school building. So everybody will be in a spot during the day.
How will you control that with social distancing if, say, the most popular room everybody goes to?
Yep, so we're gonna have to limit that to the number of desks that are already gonna be 6 feet apart and not moving within the room, so.
Ron?
So as far as the middle school schedule, that'll be a typical middle school schedule. Kids will be moving through the building periods 1 through 9 as they did last year. Obviously, the social distancing will be in place. We have the fortunate opportunity here that we can do one-way traffic in the middle school, so that will limit the number of students passing each other in the hallways. So our kids that were here last year, that was kind of in place already with lunch periods, so it'll just be now periods 1 through 9. You mentioned that lockers won't be used, so yes, students will be allowed to carry backpacks this year with them to transport their materials from one class to another. The school supply list will be going out in the newsletter, hopefully the end of this week, early next week. And we are working with teachers, as you mentioned, Dr. Douglas, to remind them that, yes, we cannot carry 5 6-inch binders around with us. The recommendation will be an AM and a PM binder, and then a folder for each class. So trying to limit the amount of things that some of our, especially our 50, 60-pound middle schooler kids, some of them will carry bags heavier than them. So we definitely have to limit that.
Well, hopefully with the remote and the technology that's being invested in by the district and the families, that we'll be able to start using that to lighten the load, certainly. Just so that the parents know that we have already placed students in their cohorts. Cohorting for the secondary is more about the days. Keeping students combined and isolated to the room cohorts are more for the elementary, as the high school and secondary schedule at the middle school cannot just keep students in one place, so they will have movement in them. If there's an uptick in Chemung County, just so that you know, some people have said, oh, I'm starting to second guess my position. I am sorry, at this point, we cannot schedule and move forward at this point from one platform or to the other. Your choice has been made, and that is in place, at least for now. If there is an extremely rare, unusual happening that has happened, it will be final administrative discretion, but that will be very limited in scope, and at this time will not even be considered. So please reach out to your principal if there is an emergent issue that's coming up. Please understand we're just trying to do the best that we can. Tony, can you talk about textbooks, reading materials for English, cultural curriculum, and the likes?
So the former was already addressed earlier. There will be shared materials. To the latter, was addressed earlier when we talked about there are shared, the curriculum is that of New York State, that we have to follow Culture, by definition, being the social studies teacher I am, is learned behavior, and we find cultural experiences in many of our classrooms throughout the secondary, throughout the district. But we do adhere to the New York State standards, and Tiffany and the work that we'll be doing with staff on those, as we have been doing with staff on essential questions and essential pieces of the curriculum cycle, and ensuring students we're focusing and honing and practicing on those areas. So culture is a natural part of the work that we do already.
Just to reiterate, accountability. There is grading. I know we are working on that, but we are trying to function as much as possible as a regular school would in any other year, with the exception that we have to take the understanding of remote and hybrid and the unique times. Is that correct? So everybody understands, if you have a question, accountability is a must. This is how you pass. This is how you enhance yourself and move forward. Reach out to your building principals or to Tony Gill as the assistant superintendent. Is that correct?
Well, first point of contact when it comes to grading is always the teacher and how the grading system works, right? They're the ones that have the local professionalism to determine the grading system, and just under the guidance of the district model and how we approach grading as a system. So obviously, yes, after those conversations, and I know our building principals will be involved in those conversations with grading, and especially for those unique circumstances where connectivity is an issue.
Thank you very much, everyone. As we said, we've covered the health and safety, we've covered the instructional, and one of the most important parts is the financial, because we are trying to be something to everybody, and it is getting harder and harder when we face a potential 20% cut. So at this time, just for a brief update as how we're trying to move forward, we will turn it to our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Ms. Katie Bizzetti.
Sure. So I think, as we all know, COVID-19 has created economic hardships just across the board. School districts are being impacted just as everyone else is. When the governor approved the state budget earlier in the year, because the state was struggling itself with its own budget and making its own end meet, there was a mechanism built into the budget that if the state's budget is struggling, it can pull 20% of state aid from public agencies at certain points throughout the year, including school districts. So we are working very hard on our end to purchase everything we need over the summer to be ready for school to start, including the PPE, the disinfecting materials, all the technology pieces, everything that we need to make this educational program a success. While at the same time, we know we have this possibility of a state aid cut. So we're being very mindful of that. We're taking a very measured approach to all of our spending. We have a set budget threshold that our community was very supportive of when we put our budget up for vote that we have to maintain. So in order to meet all these things that we need to provide our staff and students, we're basically repurposing the money that was budgeted. Well, in a normal situation, money may have been used for one purpose. We're now using it towards our technology, our PPE, our disinfecting materials. So we're doing well so far. Please be assured everything will be provided as needed, and we're keeping a tight control of the financial situation and monitoring what's coming down from the state.
And that's so true. We will try to do everything to provide what we need and keep financial watch over our budget. But as we go, there are a significant amount of new expenses that we would never have anticipated. So people have to understand that as we go and we get through the year, there may have to be some potential trade-offs, so to speak, so that we get through this year and still keep our budget as wholly intact as possible. Our job is to try to do the best for you, and that's what we're trying to do. So in our final statements, we've answered well over 150 questions tonight. Both of these will be recorded and put on to our website so that you can pick either one. We have hoped we've been consistent and clear between both of them. If you have a question, please reach out to your building principals, and then ultimately you can come to the district office, as we are running around constantly trying to solve these questions, especially in one of the shortest times to put together a school year. So from the bottom of my heart, from our whole administration, our Board of Education, we want you to know that we are trying to do our absolute best, the tireless work to make sure that our students, our staff, and our community are safe and educationally enriched moving forward. From all of us, that is our mission, to rise up and make sure that we explore all the possibilities. We are empowering people to assist us and be flexible and to help us solve these situations so that ultimately, in the end, we will all excel together as the Horsehead Central School District. My Board of Education has done a wonderful job. They are very proud of all of the work of the individuals here, both staff and administration, as well as I am. We will get through this, and we will get through this together in a collaborative, but yet patient and flexible manner. Thank you for helping us and asking all of these questions. So as we head off to the start of the school year, please know that we are trying to be everything to everybody, and there are times that we just cannot be, but we are always trying. So thank you very much. I appreciate you for joining us for this question and answer session that now ends our time with the grades 7 through 12. Thank you.